Hello everyone and welcome back. This is the second video I'm making, and this time I'm gonna start a small series, either 3 or 4 videos, that we're gonna talk about exposure. Exposure has 3 components: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Today we're gonna start with shutter speed. But before everything, let's start by explaining what is the shutter. The shutter leaves behind the lens in here. If you take off your lens and take a look in here, you will see something like this. This is the shutter. Now, DSLR cameras would have a mirror right behind the lens. If you gently pull out that mirror, you will see this. Now, if you open the shutter, in this case I just had to turn the camera on, you will see that surface here. That surface is your sensor. This is what turns light into a photograph. Never touch your sensor. It's very sensitive, and if it needs cleaning, it's a better idea to take it to a professional. Now, what does the shutter do? The shutter covers the sensor, and when you're clicking to take a picture, it opens and exposures the sensor. Okay, that's why we call it exposure. So it controls the exposure. Now that's the one part of the exposure. Okay, remember shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Yeah, but why we call it shutter speed? Well, we call it shutter speed because it will open for a certain amount of time. Okay, for example, when you have a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second, the shutter will open for 1/100th of a second. As you understand, when you have low light conditions, we need to keep our shutter open for a longer time. And when we have very bright conditions, we need to keep the shutter open for a much shorter amount of time. What shutter speed you have to choose every time, it's a whole nother story. We will talk about it after we're gonna talk about the 3 components of exposure. Now, we have fast shutter speeds and slow shutter speeds. Okay, this is a shutter speed of 1,000 of a second. Listen to this. Okay, and this is a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second. And this is a shutter speed of 1/2 of a second, 1/30th. And this is a shutter speed of 1 second. To give you an example of what kind of shutter speed you use, I'll give you 2 examples, a very bright one and a very dark one. Let's say summertime, around noon, you're taking pictures outside. Yes, you're going to use something like 1/250 of a second or even faster than that. And let's say in another situation, you are taking pictures in a room with, let's say, ambient light. You're going to use 1/80th of a second. When we're talking about shutter speeds, we also need to talk about something called long exposure. Long exposure could be anything slower, meaning more exposure time, than 1/80th of a second. And why 1/80th of a second? Because it's, in theory, the slowest shutter speed somebody can take a picture without having a motion blur. But what is a motion blur? Let's say you're taking a picture with, let's say, 1/30th of a second. Your subject might be not moving, but believe it or not, your hands are moving, the trigger that you push moved the camera, and all that thing can cause something motion blur, and it looks something like this. Now, long exposure, it's a very cool technique that gives very impressive images like this one. Shutter speeds can go up to 6500 for some cameras, even higher, some very professional cameras, and it can go down to 30 seconds and everything in between. But if you do one more click slower than 30 seconds, your camera is going to say something like bulb or B. That shutter speed, it's actually not a shutter speed. In that mode, your camera will keep the shutter open for as long as you keep your hand on the trigger. So why do you need this? Well, you might need exposure more than 30 seconds in some kinds of photography, like let's say astrophotography or something very dark. Now, long exposures in that kind of photography, like light trails or all that cool stuff, is a topic for a whole nother video. Next time we will talk about aperture. Things there are much less complicated, I hope. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, put it in the comments. I will be happy to answer it. Please like and subscribe. Thank you so much.